Welcome, everyone. Welcome to another great event at Freelancers Hub. As always, I'm Jalen Vasquez, the director of the Hub. Welcome to today's second event of the day, Make the Most of Your Apple Technology with Josiah Forgath, sponsored by MacPaw. So we had this event in person in our space last week, and we figured it would be a good opportunity to also offer it remotely for other MacBook users and other members across the nation. So we've noticed a lot of our members are MacBook users. I mean, generally as creatives, they usually choose MacBooks. I am not in that category, unfortunately, but that's just me. But generally as MacBook users and Apple users, there's a lot of things that Apple provides, whether it's functionality and apps to help productivity, but a lot of things that a lot of users may not know that the MacBook has. So that's what we're going to be uncovering today, just kind of make the most to your full capabilities of what your MacBook can do. This series is sponsored by MacPaw. It's the creator of CleanMyMac Setapp and other amazing tools that are used over 30 million Apple devices around the globe. And MacPaw has graciously made this workshop possible. And we also have a couple different free one-on-one weekly remote sessions, as well as in-person sessions here with Josiah, who does our knowledge bar with digital tools and freelance fundamentals, sorry. And pretty much anything you can to help make the best of your Apple devices. So just a little bit about our speaker today. Josiah Forgath is a certified Apple consultant who mentors freelancers and independent businesses, founders in tech mindfulness and creative solutions in his digital studio at Methods. He's also, like I mentioned, one of our resident consultants at the Knowledge Bar here at the Hub. During his 9 years at Apple, he helps local businesses, emerging startups, and enterprises adapt their approach to enabling teams with personalized tech to unlock greater collaboration and new formats of working. And today he's here to lead this event with us. We're very excited to have him here. And yeah, without further ado, let's welcome Josiah here.
Glad to be with everybody here today. I am actually here in New York City with Jalen at the Freelancers Hub, which is really exciting. We're trying to start to offer more hybrid workshops and bringing people into the hub. And if you're not in New York City, we wanted to ensure that you're also getting the value that we put together with this partnership with MacPaw. So as Jalen mentioned, yes, I did work at Apple for about 9 years before becoming a full-time small business owner and freelancer. And so that's where a lot of my knowledge and experience comes from. I've worked in Apple stores. I've also worked in Apple corporate. So I've seen both sides of what it's like to be an Apple customer. And thankfully I'm a customer now, so I can be kind of biased in the things that I recommend to other people. I'm going to go ahead and share my desktop so you guys can follow along with me. But we are going to be going through things that you can do today to actually make a big difference in your Apple experience as a freelancer. So let's see here. I think Jalen already covered most of this, but again, I'm an expert here at the Freelancers Hub. I'm here every Wednesday, so if you're in the New York area, we have the Knowledge Bar where I sit down one-on-one with people for 30 minutes at a time. We can talk about how you're using technology in your business and also focus on just the general fundamentals of being a freelancer in the world as it is today. I also run the Creative Lounge, which is kind of a new space that started this year for freelancers and other independent folks to come together and learn how to be more collaborative, find out more about some of the tools that I'm going to mention in our workshop, and just meet new folks, because I know post-pandemic, a lot of us have been displaced all over the country and, we started new lives. So it's always good to find ways to reconnect. And that's why I love working with the Freelancers Union. And as Jalen mentioned, this workshop is sponsored by MacPaw. A little background on MacPaw. So they are like one of the longest standing independent Mac developers out there, but they started with an app called CleanMyMac. And CleanMyMac has been around, I think, for almost as long as the company has been. They're celebrating their 15th anniversary this year. And other than Apple apps, CleanMyMac and other MacPaw apps are probably the second most installed non-Apple apps on Macs worldwide. So they're a really cool partner. They really believe in freelancers and they wanted to support this work. So that's why we went to them and put together a really special offering for members of the Freelancers Union, so you could hopefully start to use your Mac more effectively without maybe having to go out and upgrade, because I know sometimes getting new technology can be kind of a leap. And so we want to make sure that you can take the most advantage of what you already have today. And so those are some of the offerings that MacPaw is helping us deliver to the Freelancers Union this summer. And let's see here, going forward. So today's agenda, we're not really going to be looking at a slideshow for very much of the time, but I did want to give you guys a sense of where we're going. The first hour together, and since we're remote, we're gonna experiment to see how this goes. But I'm going to be showing you guys how to use CleanMyMac to first remove the friction from your computer, and some of my favorite practices just to tend to your Mac's health, how to simplify your overall storage and other things that are using up space on your operating system, and then go into a couple of more cutting edge, almost futuristic apps that I use that really help me do my daily work as a freelancer. And then we're going to hold most of the larger questions for the second hour. So if you're sitting there today and you start to see things that are kind of lighting up, bells for you, and you have an idea or question, just write that down, unless it's like very specific to what I'm covering in the first hour, because we will go through and answer questions and listen to what different people are using their devices for. I love to hear from other freelancers, things that they're enjoying, but also if you have questions around all the other platforms, your iPhone, your iPad, your watch, that would be great to discuss here in the second hour of the workshop. And before we get started, I don't know if anybody wants to jump into the chat. Maybe if you want to, everybody just wants to share how long they've been an Apple user, and what devices that you're using currently as an Apple user. You can put that in the chat. I'd love to see that to get an idea of kind of who we have represented. I know last week at our workshop in person, we had brand new Mac users, and we had people who've been using them for pretty much as long as they've existed. So it's always fun to see. So to give a little bit of background on where we're at right now in the Apple universe, if you guys have been paying attention the last couple of years, pretty much since 2020, Apple made some big changes to their Mac lineup. And one of the biggest things that they've done recently is finally move to their own chip architecture. So if you've been using Apple devices for a really long time, you're probably familiar that Macs ran on Intel for many, many years. It's a great partnership, and those were, that allowed Apple to, really grow the Mac lineup and get into, businesses and, other use cases beyond creatives. But as of 2020, Apple finally did the big transition that they make their own processing chips. And just like in layman's terms, what that's enabling now is you don't need to buy the most spec'd out MacBook Pro, MacBook Air, Mac, Studio as you might have used to, because these chips are really, they're running on essentially the same technology that your iPhone and your iPad does. So if you are in the market, I'm talking to a lot of people right now who are considering upgrading their Mac. This is, I would say 2023 is a really, really good year because Apple just released for the very first time ever a 15-inch MacBook Air. They've never had that size screen before. And all of their Macs now are running on their own chip architecture, which just means that if you're buying a new MacBook Pro like I did earlier this year, that computer probably is going to be able to last you, another 10 years or so if you really want to push it to the limits. We're kind of in this place where there's no ceiling to performance. So you might be one of the one-offs who, like myself, you run Final Cut Pro or other creative tools, but for most of us, we don't need the craziest amount. So that to say, if you're not in the market right now to upgrade your computer, there's a lot of things that you can do to still keep it tidy and make sure that you're being as productive as possible. And I know as freelancers and small business owners, sometimes tending to our technology is kind of the last thing on the list because we just have to focus on everything else first. So hopefully today you'll see some things that'll just make that a little bit more automated using CleanMyMac and other tools that I use as we go along. So that's where we're going to get started. If you are looking in the chat, I believe that Jalen has dropped the direct install file for CleanMyMac, which will allow you to download it directly to your computer. So one really cool thing is we're making this app available for free to all of you today for a whole 30 days. So you can use it, take full advantage of it. You can follow along with me throughout the workshop. But if you come up to a point where you get stuck, we're also going to send a guide afterwards, so you can follow along then. So don't worry if you get like into technical trouble and you get some errors, or maybe you need to allow some access and you just can't continue following along. That's okay, because you'll get a guide that will kind of walk you through it after the workshop. But the whole idea is that we want to give you this instant value so you can start to, see how helpful this can be. So if you want to follow along and run it at the same time, now would be a great time to go ahead and download that file. If you're familiar with installing apps on your Mac, it's going to go into the downloads folder. You're going to open it up. It's going to ask you to most likely move it over to your applications folder. And then when you go to open up CleanMyMac from your applications folder, you might get a pop-up saying, welcome to your trial. You have to give a couple of permissions, but it's fully free. You don't have to put in any credit card information or fill out any account info to start using it, which is really great. So I'm going to show the actual application as we go through and just kind of talk about how to use this to get a better sense of what's going on your computer. So when you first land in the application, you're going to come to this very simple screen. And this is where I spend most of my time whenever I'm using the app. But the first thing you'll be able to do is run your very first smart scan. And we're going to start with this because it's going to give you a lot of information that you may have never seen before in terms of what's happening behind the scenes. Depending on how long you've been using your computer, could take a couple of minutes, could take longer. If you don't have that many files and you're a minimalist, it might be instant. So you just give it a little bit of time to run. I'm going to talk about a couple of the elements here in the smart scan. So number one is like, for cleaning up things that are happening on your Mac. There's a lot of stuff that goes on in the background that as users, Apple doesn't really want us to know about. We don't need to know about it, but there are a lot of temporary files and cache files that are left behind from different applications that you might be using throughout the day. So if you are in a situation where you have a computer that's running lower on space or performance, then you will see some instant improvement if you can clean up some of that background information. And so once your smart scan is complete, you can go ahead and always review the details. I don't look at this very often myself because it's mostly technical stuff, but it's not going to be locating anything that is critical to your operating system or critical to your apps. It's just stuff that's kind of been left behind by the operating system over time. Sometimes I see people come up with as much as 10 or 15 gigabytes worth of stuff that they can clean up, which I know some of us use computers that might have 256 gigs of hard drive space. Like that can mean a lot of space saved up for you just in the first smart scan that you run. And then there's a couple of things in terms of malware and protection. So we'll look at that here in a second, but this is the experience that you'll have. And it's really important in order to actually use the feature, you have to run after you've scanned it, you do have to click run, and it will ask you if there's any open applications in the background for you to go ahead and quit those. If you want to quit them, you don't have to. And then it will go through and it'll run all of those tasks. And so normally, within 30 seconds, you can do a really quick cleanup here and start to see some performance come back on your computer. I'm on a brand new MacBook Pro, and I still run a smart scan every couple of weeks just to ensure, because I do a lot of work with Final Cut and other pretty high performing programs that do leave behind files. So I do use this even as someone who owns a brand new Mac. The great thing is once you finish that first scan, what you'll probably see is a couple of recommendations here that will kind of guide you to the next things that you can do. So it's even though this is a utility, it's kind of a fun way to go through and just better understand what other things you could probably take care of. So if you're someone who likes to organize and keep things tidy, this is going to be fun to go through. For me, there's some other things that I can head into from here. But that's really the first thing that you're going to come through when you arrive here on CleanMyMac. Before we go through some of the other features that I use really frequently, I do also want to point out that both on the main screen, you have the assistant that you can open at any time, which will give you that full report of things specific to your computer. So you might have a couple of apps that are ready to be updated. You might have not ran a security or privacy scan in the background for a while. You can scan for malware if you're worried that you've been downloading stuff that potentially could have some vulnerabilities to it. Just some recommendations. And if you're a first-time user, like I just installed CleanMyMac today, fresh to show you guys, it'll actually give you a little report here, which is nice. So you can see how much work it's been doing behind the scenes. The other really cool thing about the app is the menu bar assistant. So if you're familiar, up here in the top right corner of your Mac in the menu bar, apps are tending to take more advantage of the space now with little utilities. So you can actually go ahead and open up the CleanMyMac menu bar assistant at any time. And this is usually, as a longtime user, what I'm using more frequently because I do a lot of remote work. I'm jumping on meetings. And so there's things that I just want to have a quick look at. One of the things is the malware scan. So if you are downloading files frequently, it's always doing a background scan whenever a new file is brought down to your operating system. And CleanMyMac has partnered with some of the best in the industry to ensure that that privacy is being enabled. It's not like a virus scanner you're used to on a PC where it can usually kind of be always running in the background and crash your performance. A lot of virus scanning software especially on Macs is not necessary, but this is a little bit more intelligent in terms of just looking at what's being brought down that's new to your computer from the internet. And you can also click on a couple of these other tiles. So I'll go through these quickly, but you can get a quick idea of how much space is being used on your computer. So if you haven't taken a look for a while, Apple does have a storage area and settings now that you can see. I like this because it's faster and it gives me information in terms of what types of apps are using the most amount of storage. You can also free up memory really quickly. So sometimes if you're on a Mac that is kind of being pushed to its limits, you'll see the beach ball show up, like the classic, rainbow beach ball. And you'll know that usually means that your current memory on your Mac is kind of running out of space. It's drowning a little bit. So this is the best way to see what apps are using the most performance currently. If something's running in the background that you kind of forgot about, you can instantly quit it. It's non-destructive, but you can also free up memory. So when you click free up, what CleanMyMac does is it just takes a look at all of the processes on your computer and it says, okay, so here's some things that just don't need to be running right now in the background. And it just like quietly kind of flushes the system. So I use that pretty frequently if I'm ever, running a couple applications in my browser. I've got some editing going, maybe photo editing as well. I'm kind of pushing the limits. That can give me a little bit of current memory back. And you can also check your battery life. So this might be helpful if you've had your Mac for a while and you want to know how the battery health is. So you can actually see how many cycles you've used, which means a full charge and then depletion of the battery. If you're nearing the cycle count, you might actually be seeing lower battery life. So this is a nice way to get a sense of if your battery health is good and also just how much it's charged up to. Same thing with CPU. If you're kind of more of a geeky kind of person and you want to see what's using, the CPU, the performance on the computer, another way to quit high performing apps, like I'm not going to quit Zoom right now, but clearly Zoom is using a lot of performance on my computer. And the final two that I love a lot is the ability to run a really quick speed test. So rather than having to open my browser, go to speed test dot whatever and run a speed test, I can just do a one-click speed test. And this is actually more of a real life application of a speed test because it downloads a little file in the background, that's temporary file just to see how fast the download speed is. And then it also checks the upload speed simultaneously. You can kind of get a real-time graph. I have this open almost every time I'm on video calls, just because even when we have good internet, sometimes good internet is not predictable. So it's nice to know if it's you or if it's the network without having to run off and interrupt what you're doing. You can just open up the menu bar app really quickly. And then finally, like one of the advantages of the Apple ecosystem is we have all of our devices on the same network connected and also paired via iCloud most likely. So if you want to see the battery life on your current devices and you also want to even see how much space is being used without having to go and open up your iPhone and go into settings, they've built this really smart way to essentially see what the other statuses are on all your connected devices. So another way even just to see like my AirPods connected right now, I can see the battery life on them and not worried. I don't think they're going to run out of battery during our call today. So those are the two main interfaces of when you get started with my Mac that I would use the most frequently as a longtime user. And you don't really even have to do much more than that, but we're going to go into some of the additional features that I think will help you out today. So if we're going back to open up CleanMyMac, we're going to talk about optimization. So if we jump down here into optimization, actually, I'm going to kind of consider a few things here, optimization beyond what they have on the sidebar. But one of the first things is going under applications. So if you've been using your Mac for a while, you might have accumulated. For me, I'm a big app person, so I'm going to have probably more than the average user, but I do test a lot of applications and install and use them for a few weeks and then uninstall. Sometimes I don't uninstall. So this will give you a bird's eye view of every application that's currently on your computer. And what I love is if you've been using it for a while, you can see things like applications you may have downloaded and never used. So that might be something that you want to instantly uninstall with one click or two clicks. You potentially, hopefully not, might see a suspicious application that CleanMyMac considers suspicious. But you can also go through just kind of from the source as well. So if you want to see all your Apple apps, for instance, when you get a new Mac, all of the default apps are on there. You might not need GarageBand, you might not need iMovie, you might not even need Pages, Numbers, and Keynote. So you can always uninstall even the default apps and save yourself some space with a one-click uninstall. A lot of us are Creative Cloud users. So I know sometimes we have subscriptions to Creative Cloud and then we no longer are subscribing to Creative Cloud, but a lot of that stuff gets left behind. So you can actually see Creative Cloud is probably one of the biggest. They have lots of micro apps. So you'll see a lot of different things related to Creative Cloud here. And not to uninstall Creative Cloud, but if you for some reason don't need it, that's easy to see there. And then under other, you can just do a quick scan. I like to do this every so often where I just scan through and say, you know what, I haven't used that app in a couple of months and I don't need it anymore. So I'm going to go ahead and uninstall it. And when you do click uninstall here, what's really nice is that all of the related files that are sort of just used by the operating system to support that app, those are also removed at the same time, which doesn't always happen when you do like the classic pull an application and drop it in the trash can. So, that this is a little bit more efficient way to make sure that all those extra files go with it if you don't need that app anymore. So that's always the second thing I like to do after I do a smart scan with folks who are new to this is just let's take a look at your apps, because that can also be a place that you can make some quick decisions to help optimize your operating system. The other one that might sometimes not be so apparent is under the speed section here. We have the optimization section, and when you go in, you'll see a certain amount of items that have been identified. One of the things on newer Macs, it's not as necessary to turn these on or off, but specifically on older Macs, if you're the type of user who likes to turn off your computer at the end of the day, or you're switching between user accounts, so you're having to launch your whole computer fresh at certain points in time, sometimes you might not realize that you allowed certain apps to just turn on at login. And so that can kind of sneak past you and during the install process. Some of them you want to, because you want them to have their background processes so they can track things and such. But you might be surprised to find apps that are allowed to turn on when you turn on your Mac that you just literally don't need, and you might want to uninstall them as well, like we just covered. But you can quickly disable things that are set to turn on at login, and this can just ensure that the startup process is a lot faster. Like when you get past the home screen and you're waiting for everything to start up, like your applications to reopen and whatever you were last doing on your computer, this can help with that. Just so it's not as burdened by so many things needing to open right at the beginning. So I always like to help people take a look at their login items. And again, in this case, you don't have to uninstall anything. You can just quickly disable just right from here from one click. So those are kind of the main things. There's quite a few other little details you can do with from an optimization standpoint, but those two combined can really help get you on more solid footing. And then we move into the portion of the conversation around storage. So storage comes up a lot of times when I'm meeting with people one-on-one, when we're talking about their digital ecosystem. They want to be more efficient. They don't want to have the friction every time they open up their computer. So we always have to talk about file storage and structure and organization. My biggest encouragement is that instead of getting overwhelmed, I think sometimes we'll look at our desktop or we'll look at our documents folder or something. We'll just get really overwhelmed. I like to think first, like, how can I reduce more at a large scale, and then start to kind of narrow in and think more about organization, which we'll get to here in a moment. So that's also where CleanMyMac gives you two tools that can make that a lot faster than having to open up your Finder window and start digging through folders and trying to see how much space is being used. It's just really not, it's not effective to do it that way, which is why we sometimes just kind of ignore that in the background, and because we have more important work to do. But if you look in the sidebar, you'll see under files you'll see large and old files. That's where I like to start, because you'll quickly get a snapshot of how much space you have available on your hard drive and what you're currently using. If you have an external hard drive or something, you can also view multiple hard drives, but we're just going to look at the internal one today. And similar to the Smart Scan, you can go ahead and run a quick scan. This will go a lot faster, most likely, even if you have a lot of stuff on your computer. And immediately you have this report essentially that will show you what is using the most space on your computer. So rather than getting mired down in the small details, you can kind of go top level and say, okay, I had no idea that I had left this Final Cut Pro project behind that I was last editing probably back in February, and it has a lot of cache and render files attached to it. And I've just been lazy. I just forgot to delete it. So this is helpful because I could instantly, save 200 gigabytes right off of my storage. I leave that there as an example, but you can start to go down and you might recognize some of these files. You might not recognize them, but if you look at the amount of storage they're taking, might give you an idea. And the largest ones are most likely going to be video files. So if you have Zoom recordings that you've downloaded, or webinar things, or other types of creative stuff, if you're more of a creative, those are probably going to come to the surface. One nice thing is if you don't know what something is, even from the title, you can right click, which was on your trackpad. If you have a trackpad, that's just a 2-finger click on Mac, or if you have a mouse, also there's multiple ways to right click, but you can do command click, and you can actually reveal in the Finder. So you can instantly open up a Finder window and it will take you all the way down to wherever that file is located. And that might give you a better idea of what is this file, where did it come from, what application is it related to, or you can, of course, preview it and you can open it up and view it, if it's a document or if it's a video. So that's a quick way to this is I would say the large and old files explorer. And you can also go by the types of files. So that might be a faster way to kind of zoom around. Also, like, what have you not used or touched or opened for over a month? You can also see things. And again, most of these really large files for me, I haven't touched them in a month. So maybe they belong on an external hard drive or up in the cloud as being backed up because I don't need them anymore. Maybe they just don't belong here at all. Maybe I'm done with those projects and I can remove them. But this is where I like to start, especially if you've been using your current computer for a little while. And then similarly, you can use the space lens. So this would be kind of step 2, would be the space lens. And this is the one I use in a more ongoing manner because I'm just curious about what's using the most amount of space. So rather than it just looking at the files, it's going to kind of look at the folders. And this gets us more into organization. So if you have certain folders on your computer that are just stuffed full of stuff, this will maybe kind of help you decide where to start doing some organization first. Whereas like instead of just kind of getting mired in whatever you see, the users folder is on default on Mac, like where kind of all of our most important files and operating system related information gets saved. So if you dial into the users folder, you'll see then probably your name or whatever the name of you've given the home folder on your computer. And then if you click down one more time into one of these bubbles, you will be able to explore again some of the most common folders that we have. So I'm going to focus on downloads for a moment because downloads can be a culprit where we just kind of keep bringing stuff down from the internet. We forget to go through it. So rather than like if I was to open up my downloads and see everything here, this is to me a little bit overwhelming and I don't want to deal with that. So sometimes I would rather just see it in order of what's taking up the most space. And quickly preview some of these things. You can dial into each file and see if there's actually a thumbnail, you might be able to tell what it is, or by the name. But this is a quick way. So if you have a lot more smaller files in your downloads, like documents, and you quickly see them, you're like, yeah, I don't need those. Rather than having to do command delete or dragging to the trash from your Finder, you can do quick, removal here and just go through and check a couple of things that you no longer need. You'll see how much space you're going to end up removing before you do it. And you can even review once more if you want to be really careful, and then hit remove, and then they'll move those over to your trash for you. So I think in terms of file storage and the complexities of how do we clean stuff up, it's not always a fun process, but this can definitely get you kind of to the source a little bit quicker, especially if you're thinking about upgrading a new Mac and you want to make sure that you have cleaned up some things before you go to a whole new computer. Going a little bit away from CleanMyMac for a moment, a lot of people then will ask me, okay, well, what's your approach to file organization and storage, and where should I be putting everything these days on my Mac? I'm just going to speak from a more biased standpoint and what I've been doing as a pretty advanced Apple user. Like a few years ago, I decided that in terms of I wasn't using a backup hard drive as much anymore. I'm on the go. I'm always connected to the internet. And for me, it made a lot of sense to fully embrace iCloud because Apple's done such a good job of expanding the benefits of iCloud to go beyond just file storage. It includes your email, it includes privacy settings. It also has lots of other little stuff that you can do that's just kind of part of your Apple ecosystem, including your photos. Like if you're not using photos in the cloud yet, just having everything sync across your devices automatically is a game changer. And you also have the redundancy that iCloud gives you because Apple, as like most big companies now, have pretty smart and immense server populations, so they can do a much better job of backing up your data. And Apple is obviously very focused on privacy and security, so you can know that it's safe and secure, and there's just more redundancy than even if you were trusting yourself to have a single hard drive as your extension. We think that that's somehow a sense of security, but honestly, if that hard drive goes and you don't have a backup of that hard drive, you don't have a backup of anything. So that's how I approached it when I started to think about where I wanted to put all of my files. And how that works practically for me is in iCloud Drive. If you don't use iCloud Drive very much, you might not you don't need to look at it that often, but Apple might have encouraged you to put your documents and your desktop items in there. And you can put as many folders as you want in iCloud Drive. So I treat iCloud Drive as my hard drive, essentially, for everything that isn't, obviously my applications get installed on my hard drive. My big like editing files and stuff live on my hard drive, but for everything else, like my documents, my business information, and pretty much anything I'm saving that's small will just default to iCloud Drive. And for my business, I have one general folder. I like to go kind of down hierarchy of just going as most general type of topics down further. So it goes my business to like my design, my business to like partners and different things like that. So, and it's not perfect. Like I'm showing this on purpose. Like I'm not perfect with my file organization, but I have client folders and finances and my personal photos for like my avatar, like things like that. And so the other thing with the Finder is once you have moved some of those things into iCloud, you can always put anything you want on the sidebar. So for instance, I could drag one of these folders that I want out of here. Let's see, just take this setup folder and I could put it in my favorites so I could have instant access to it right from my sidebar. So if you haven't ever moved around and clean and kind of played around with what you have organized in your sidebar, the sidebar is actually really powerful to create the organization that you want for whatever folders you want access to. They can be in iCloud, they can be on your hard drive, they can even be on an external hard drive, but that's how I access all the most important things. And I have this overall. The really also helpful thing of moving into embracing iCloud is that Apple does all the heavy lifting for you in optimizing your storage. So they don't just optimize your storage when it comes to photos, they also optimize your storage when it comes to files. So for instance, I have, files that might be archives for myself that go way back. And I have this sorted by year. So you can see some things that I haven't modified for a really long time. And if you notice this little cloud icon, that means that most likely most of those file contents are actually being hosted in the cloud right now, and they don't get opened up, similar to kind of like Dropbox's approach. They don't really live on your hard drive until you need to open them. And with internet connectivity today, and with most files, it only takes a few seconds to do a quick download of a couple megabyte folder. So, for instance, like I might have some backgrounds that I save here, and I want to go in and I want to download that really quickly, so I go in here and I'm looking at, maybe some images, and, I have this gradient wallpaper folder, like with about 100 different gradients. You can see they're not all there live, but if I instantly went to open that, in about 2 seconds, that file is now on my computer. And you can see, I know we have a little slower internet here in the classroom, but normally that would be, pretty much instant. And now I can open up that file. But I don't need it always on my computer, because I might only open it, every couple of months or never again. It might just be an archive. So that's the other benefit. In some cases, if you're not used to that mentality, it might be seen as a negative. But I think over time, when you're letting things just be optimized, then if you have a computer that is already kind of struggling for space, letting Apple decide what you're using most frequently and keeping the rest in the cloud can also like really free up a lot of space and performance on your computer. So this is something that I even encourage folks who are not even upgrading or don't have the latest and greatest. This can be a really big help, as long as you have a computer that has a pretty recent operating system that supports all of the recent advantages of iCloud. So it's a little bit of a detour, but that's one of the big questions that comes up. And like we just talked about, just sort of thinking through reducing. Let me go back here. First, reduce using CleanMyMac. Try to get rid of as much of the things that might cause you to get slowed down and friction when you're trying to do a cleanup and tidying your Mac. And then number two, kind of decide where you're going to centralize everything. It doesn't have to be in iCloud. It could just still be in your home folder, but you make two primary folders, like your work and your personal, and then everything cascades underneath that. I kind of call them umbrella folders if you do it in iCloud. And try not to overthink it, because the other thing, and we'll talk about this in a few moments, but search has gotten a lot faster on the Mac, and I use an app called Raycast that makes it even more quick to find what you need. So for me, I don't actually think so much of like how many folder levels do I have. I just think about, what have I used most recently and what do I need to pull up, and I can start searching, with one keystroke. So also I teach people, and it might take some getting used to, but to really move more towards a mentality of searching for things on your computer, rather than always having to open up the file system and then go down through, each level and look for things, which also just, write out, file descriptions that are a little bit more plain language, so you can find things that you might be looking for in the future. But that's another reason why I don't overthink a lot of the actual structure of everything once you've got things a little bit cleaned up. So that concludes, and I know we went through a lot in a short amount of time, and probably there's a lot to catch up on. So a lot of it's going to be going through it on your own and exploring, and everybody has their own use case and has a different approach to how they use their technology. So not everybody will be the same, but I think that, CleanMyMac is that first step in helping you just think through what is causing me the greatest amount of friction. Like if I open up my computer every single day and I have a sense of anxiety and frustration, what is causing that? And a lot of times it's just the little things. And so I think we can't really get onto the really great work until we kind of help take care of some of those little things that might be causing us technological friction. And I also want to mention that MacPaw, the company that makes CleanMyMac, they also make an amazing app called Setapp that's basically your own personal app library. So I'm going to show you guys a couple of other apps that I use that are part of Setapp, that it also includes CleanMyMac. So if you're going to go ahead and subscribe to CleanMyMac, the great thing is for about $12 a month, you can get like 249 more apps. And so whenever you have a new task that you need to take care of, or you're looking for a new utility, I use Setapp because they have really great search. They have an AI tool built in now where you can find helpful guides and different things. So CleanMyMac is also part of that app library, and just creates a really great value. And we've also created a freelancer set here in Setapp that I designed with MacPaw. So if you want just a quick install a couple of apps to try them out, we're going to talk about two of them today. This is designed especially for freelancers, where you're working by yourself and you might need apps just to kind of help supercharge what you're already doing in the Setapp library. So let's see. I don't know, Jalen, do we want to answer any questions that came up before we move into the next section?
Yeah, there was a couple questions in the chat. Person was, what are the best apps on a Mac? I mean, maybe this will be also later, but what are the best apps on a Mac that offers enterprise level endpoint protection similar to what ESET offers for PCs?
Gotcha. Yeah, we might come back to that. There is an app that's part of Setapp that is called, let's see here. Pull it up. We may need to take the question offline too, just to better understand what you're looking for. But I use an app called Pareto Security, and this does a little bit more extensive background checks of all of the sort of the fundamental security features that Apple gives you on your computer. Sometimes I do chat with people who have, had different various data breaches and things happen for themselves personally, or if they work for themselves. So this is a really good one. I also know that MacPaw has been working on some other security features and apps just to help, because as independent workers, we don't always have the same protections that you get when you're working at a company. But I do really enjoy this app because it gives you a one-click, kind of like CleanMyMac, access to see if all of the most recommended security settings on your computer are enabled. And if they're not enabled, it will kind of walk you through how to make sure that you can turn those things on. So I've been able to use this just to kind of do those background checks as well, but you can see it checks for that system integrity, make sure you're all up to date on software updates that could include security patches, the Mac OS updates, and then if you're using the firewall features that Apple provides you, if you want to be extra secure. So that's a really good one to check out.
Cool. We have another question from Kevin. I'm always concerned about deleting cache and log files and how it might affect current settings. Does CleanMyMac account for recent files that are needed? Yeah, it's a little bit, I mean, I would say it's kind of magic because I don't know how they do it, but they are very good at not removing anything that is essential, in terms of CleanMyMac, when they're removing those background files that are cache files and temporary files. And you can choose to have, there's a separate tool in there to wipe some of your browser history and your browser files, but it doesn't do that as aggressively. So I haven't ran into any issues where I'm currently working on something and I lose unless you tell it to, it won't wipe out certain files that you need for a Final Cut Pro project or other things like that. These are very much types of cache files that the operating system is already intending to probably remove eventually, but it might not remove them until there's space needed, and it just goes ahead and kind of gets overwritten. But you can kind of do that proactively. So I've personally never ran into losing any important files along the way. So yeah, but it's a really good question. Cool. I think we'll just take one more question for the time being before we move on. This question is about font book. Why can't I remove or disable hundreds of Apple fonts that come on board, like Nado and languages I can't read? As a designer, it's a huge albatross and major roadblock, and many communities online are commenting on this. Why is this? Will Apple address it? And if so, when?
That's a new one. I haven't ran into that. I do know that as part of, this is somewhat related, and I can also check with my friends at MacPaw to see what their thoughts are. But there are some optimizations within CleanMyMac. I'm not exactly sure where it is right now, but you are able to go through and remove unnecessary language files that ship on the Mac. So that I don't think that has to do with the fonts, but that is kind of an overlap where, sometimes those secondary languages that you might not need, that are taking up space, those can be removed as part of the deeper scan that you do. related, because I see another question coming up around font management. And since we're about to talk more about Setapp, and we already looked at one of the apps in Setapp, it includes a really incredible font manager. And this might give you a different way to kind of take a look at everything that's installed by Apple and by Adobe. I use Typeface constantly because it helps me when I'm trying to compare fonts, and especially because now we get fonts from all different sources. I'm usually going between Google fonts and Adobe fonts and things that I've downloaded from the internet and bought from other foundries. So I love Typeface because you can instantly activate and I believe deactivate fonts right from Typeface on your computer. And that is part of the Setapp library that's included in those 250 apps. Yeah, so Typeface, if we open that up really quickly, just give you a slight preview, just got an update recently. Yeah, so like I was comparing fonts recently here and it remembers my history. These are all of the Adobe fonts that I have in my account. So, I can scroll through and look at them in, different formatting, but also go in per font and then actually see the different, weights and, some of these fonts, will definitely display differently depending on the use case. So I do want to, be able to go through like that. Another great thing is when you're comparing fonts, you can actually hold them aside. So you'll see this little tab at the bottom. You can do a quick collection as you're going through and you can say, oh man, I really love this one. That one, not so much. And you can collect those. And so you'll see that your collection is building and then you can look at that collection at the end. So this is just a really fast way to start to compare and contrast and manage them. And going back to the previous question, yeah, so I don't believe you can do anything. Yeah, you cannot deactivate system fonts here from Fontbook or from Typeface. But you can obviously turn on even just Google Fonts directly and other things. And when you see this little button up here, that means to activate the entire font family. And you can deactivate it also with one click. So that's my favorite. I've tried quite a few. There's really good ones out there beyond this one, but this is included in the app library that I already pay for. So it makes total sense. But yeah, I'll have to do some more research, saving the chat and about the issues with Fontbook, with some of those files, because I'm not sure about that one. I haven't come across that before, but it sounds like an issue for some of the people in the creative community. I think we'll jump into a couple more of the apps that I use, and then we can open it up for live questions and everything before we go too far. But so we've already kind of introduced you guys, set up two of the apps that I wanted to talk about, and from a standpoint of simplifying your experience as an Apple user. And it's also very cutting edge at the same time, but these are ones that the first one I cannot live without whenever I set up a new computer, and it is called Paste. Paste is included in Setapp, and it's this really simple idea, but it's kind of crazy that it doesn't exist yet built into the operating system. Whenever you're going around and we are copying and pasting on our computer, a lot of the times, if you've been using computers for a long time, that's considered you're adding something to the clipboard, right? We have these skeuomorphic ideas of like real life items. So we're putting that copy onto the clipboard and then we're pasting it somewhere else. If you're someone who uses shortcuts, you might do Command-C, Command-V, or you might right-click, hit copy. But in today's world, we're grabbing information all over the place from emails and from, websites, and we're putting it all together and collating it sometimes. So I started using this app way back in the day at Apple because I wasn't given many automation tools, unfortunately, even working internally there. And so I just needed a way to quickly copy a lot of things and then paste them somewhere else. So how Paste works is it puts a little toolbar here, or little app icon in your toolbar, your menu bar, and it shows everything that you have recently copied in these really nice cards. So you can see text, you can see links, you can see websites that are previewed, and you can also create little collections of things that you're always copying and pasting. So if you are a consultant and you're always sending people certain calendar links or something, you can actually create a separate clipboard that's always there. It's kind of like your own little, saved preview of those. And so like for when I was going through and preparing for this workshop this month, I had a couple of pieces of text and the 2 links that I'm always sharing. And the great thing is whenever you open up paste, there's also a keyboard shortcut, Command Shift V. You can just start typing. So anything that you've copied in the last, I have mine set to, I think, a month of history, which is really helpful. You can just start typing. So if I was typing something to Jalen, that would show up. If I was typing anything freelance, here's all the freelance stuff that I've copied and pasted in last month. So it's almost like the second brain, and it seems too simple, but it really comes in handy. And it really comes in handy when you're having to copy different forms of content. So if you have to copy a link and then a piece of text and then like even an image, you can save those images to the paste clipboard, and you can quickly go and paste them multiple times, even in multiple places at once. There's nothing more to it. Like there's nothing crazy in terms of setup. You don't have to, really know anything more than this. You can also just like drag and drop the items right out of the pasteboard. So it's really nice, and I can open that up, in my browser if that was a link that I wanted to open, but that comes really, quite in handy. So I'm going to show you guys with the next app how I use paste, because we're going to talk a little bit about documents. And I have been a Craft user for a couple of years. Craft came on to the market about, I think, in early 2020, maybe right before the pandemic, and just sort of reinvented the whole notion of what we do with documents on our Mac and our iPhone and our iPad. I would say very kindly that Apple has not done very much to reimagine the word processing functions on their computers. Google Sheets is still a word processor. Google Sheets, Google Docs is still a word processor in the browser that looks more like, what we had back in the 90s than it does anything that we're looking towards the future. But meanwhile, a lot of the things we're sharing online, we ultimately take documents and we send them to people. We ask for comments, we collaborate on documents. And so in terms of having to have people set up accounts for different services, or, not even just sometimes not having the right file format. I started using Craft early on when I started working for myself, because I just wanted to send somebody a link to a document instead of having to worry about the formatting and how they were going to receive it and open it and how they were going to comment on it or annotate it. Because I work with other partners and clients as well. It's really great for clients. So, and the best thing to do is just to show you guys what the interface looks like, but it's really to help you design more beautiful documents that have a lot more dynamic content in them, more like a web page, without having to know how to set up a web page, but then also to give you this all-in-one workspace for your document creation, for teams you're working on, and maybe even for your clients. I've worked with some freelancers that are using Craft to manage all their deliverables that they give to each client, and they create a space for them and they send them pre-templated things. So this also plays a role in your file, really your file storage on your Mac, because if you can start to host all of your documents in one place and your daily notes and even stuff with your calendar, you don't have to be creating so many files all over your computer, and you just have one centralized place to go. And Craft is sort of the alternative, I would say, to something that is like Notion, where a lot of people are getting into Notion as a web app because they need the project management functions that come along with Notion that also include writing and stuff. I'm a huge Notion user, but for people who just want to deliver really well produced documents, Notion isn't the best for that. And also Notion has even today, it has a really deep learning curve if you're just getting started, whereas Craft makes a lot of sense for just having it all in one workspace, just for sharing information and collaborating. So that's why I like to get people started with Craft. And to give you an idea of just how dynamic documents can be, you can open up the templates here and you'll see that they've done a really great job of curating templates that are actually extremely helpful, that are personal and focused on business, and much more on like people like us, like freelancers who have sort of mixed work and mixed personal life, rather than we work at a big corporation or we have a big team around us. So like I love to show, for instance, they built a template that is an entire, dashboard here for, your single business. And, you can start using this template right away, and you can, put links in, you can add different pages. So each document in Craft can actually have multiple pages inside of it. and you can go ahead and open that up. And this is actually pre-formatted for you to be able to share this with a different client or something. And also has a page that it just has like meeting logs built in where you can reference dates and stuff. So this is a little bit more advanced, but you can see right away that this looks like it could be on the internet, and it can be on the internet with one click, where you could share this and write this out as a plain text document and then start to format it and add different forms of dynamic content. A really good example is when you get started using Craft. This is the Getting Started handbook that they've created. Again, they've built it in Craft for you to use, and each of these are their own pages. So when you open up this page, for example, you can see that you can do multiple kinds of formatting. You can do color backgrounds. You can drag in, like I dragged in this link in our last workshop just to show how it expands links really nicely. You can drag and drop photos into the document, and it will actually auto format the orientation of those photos, but you can quickly choose, to set them to a different kind of formatting. So if you need to stand up a really quick, even just like a splash page for something, maybe for a meeting you have coming up, or you want to get people's feedback, like any of these pages in Craft can be instantly shared. And that's the next big part, is that Craft is a very collaborative platform. So when you click on the share button, it's going to be a lot different than what you're used to seeing in another document editor, where normally we're thinking about, okay, I've got to export this. Am I sending it in PDF? Will I send my document in Microsoft Word? Should I make it an image? Whatever. But instead, what I tend to do, because I work with people in different organizations, is I just instantly share the link to the document, and it's now on my clipboard. Again, if we open up Paste, you'll see that that link just got added to my clipboard, and I can go ahead and open up my browser and open up a private window here, so I'm not logged in. And instantly, this document can be viewed by anybody on the internet. So the really wonderful thing is that people through their browser get almost the same experience as you do in the app, and they can interact with all of this. And the great thing is too, is this is in a private browser window. I can actually comment on this document right now without having to. I can sign up if I want to, or I can just put my name, and you can have somebody like a client or whatever, type their comments, and then add it. And it shows that I'm an external user. I've reviewed that document. Didn't have to become a Craft user to do that. Although it is available on Windows, it is available on Mac, and it is available on the web. And then when I come back into Crafts, after I've shared that document, I will see that there's a new comment right here that was added to the top of the document. It's already live, and I can respond back to that if I wanted to. And so that link actually stays static the entire time you're working. So that link will never change. So if you've sent it out to someone, like even if you needed to do a quick kind of rough proposal, you're not like maybe working with a contract yet, but you just want to type out a quick rough proposal. I do a lot of things like that with Craft, and you can share it, and there's a lot more advanced options. But that's really what kind of helps me. Again, like everything lives here, so I don't have to go find this again in my files somewhere. It's all within Craft. And the other really interesting thing is, because documents and notes and our calendar sort of go hand in hand. So they have taken this approach that I really love, is allowing you to create daily notes within Craft. So all you have to do is in that sidebar, move over here, to the calendar view, and you get the ability to add a daily note. If you work by yourself and you're sometimes having to do all your own planning and organizing, it's really nice to have this almost stream of consciousness that you can go back to and see what you were working on each day or what's coming up for your day. So you can easily link whatever calendars you have already connected to your Apple Calendar on your Mac. So in this case, I could see that today for my daily note, I have this workshop coming up. And if I just wanted to start typing, I can just start typing notes. And I can reference things. I can even reference a document like the Craft handbook that I just was editing. I can say, I can turn this into a to-do with 2 little brackets, and I can say need to, finish editing at, and then my Craft handbook. And now that's linked. And what's really cool is you can actually hover over the things that you've referenced in your daily note. So you can go right to it with one click, or you can preview what it is. And you'll also notice that rather than having to use a really maybe exorbitant task manager you can just get these little to-do notifications up at the top right corner. So you'll see when you're viewing in the sidebar here, again, you'll see there's one to do for today. Also see that now I have this workshop coming up. Well, I want to be really prepared for my workshop, so I can click here and create a note specific to this event. So I can see all of the information from my calendar kind of in a plain text view. I can see that Jalen sent me that invite, but then I can start writing my notes right under here and be really ready. So in theory, if you're someone who works remotely a lot, it's nice to kind of relieve the friction and have to have all these different tabs open, or maybe you keep notes somewhere else. I'm also a handwritten note person, so I totally understand that. But it's just nice to be like, okay, where's my next meeting? Come in here, explore, grab it. Great, I'm good to go. I can even join the Zoom right from Craft. I don't have to go look at my calendar. So it kind of takes you out of like the calendar mode all the time. So that's the power of the daily note. And the other thing is, like with a lot of document editors, you have so much going on most of the time. Like you'll notice this is a very clean interface, but I can start to format different things within Craft very easily. So if I want to, select this right here, there's all of my different formatting over here that's on the side. So you get all the same formatting and a lot more than you would in a normal document editor. But if you want to just write, because this is a great place just to write with uninterrupted, like I've written blog posts using Craft and stuff, grabbed information I need. There's this little focus button that just takes all the Chrome away and lets you write in a focused mode. And it tells you focus mode is on. And you can see here, and you can tab through the pages, but you can also leave focus mode with one click. So that's really handy if you just need to sit down and get some work done and not be inundated by anything. And again, this isn't in your browser or anything, so you're not like being distracted by tabs or notifications and other stuff. So that's kind of the connecting point. And the last thing is like going back to us using Paste. If I'm going through and writing this document, I can quickly add this link to the page for the freelance fundamentals offering that I have here at the lounge. And I can move that around. You can see that just became dynamic content in my document. So it's not just a link, it actually expands kind of more like you would see on a website. And so like using Paste alongside Craft can make your workflow go a lot faster. And you don't have to go to multiple apps or kind of figure out how you're going to share something with people. So that's why I always love, there's so many apps going back to us talking about using Setapp, but Craft, you get the premium edition of Craft as part of Setapp. And that also means that you get you get access to their assistant that's built in, which is one of the best, implementations of an assistant I've seen in any app so far. So if I'm going to go here, assistant, and summarize everything that I've already put here. Here's a summary of everything that's going on in my day. I can insert that or copy it, using some AI, but I can also use the assistant, write a summary for my Apple, workshop to share with attendees. I don't know what's going to happen here, but let's just see. This is, again, just a rewriting of what that's already on the page. But this is written now as an email, and I have this whole email text that I could send to all of you guys right now if I wanted to send you to remind you to join the workshop. So this can also play really nicely with other things you need to do in other places by using the assistant, and you can copy and share right out of Craft. So that's included in the premium version of Craft that comes with Setapp, which is really, really nice. So I have more apps I can share with you guys, but I think, Jalen, maybe we should open up for some live questions and comments and feedback at this point.
Sure. So if there's anyone who has any questions right now, feel free to type it in about anything that we've covered or anything else. There is one question right now in the chat. I'm a graphic designer and I'm on an old iMac, thinking of getting the new 15-inch Air. Can it handle Adobe Creative Cloud, or do I need a MacBook Pro? Is 16 gigabytes of RAM enough?
Yes, absolutely. I got to test out a M2 MacBook Air 13-inch last year, doing all the same things I do on this brand new MacBook Pro in Final Cut, doing multicam editing with 3 to 4 streams. And it was I believe it was an 8 gig of RAM on that 13-inch MacBook Air. Essentially with the new Apple M2 chips, and potentially there'll be new M3 chips later this year, it reduces so much of the need to rely on the RAM and what's going on in the hard drive. So like it's really, really hard to push the limits of these new computers, even on a MacBook Air. The MacBook Air is also fanless, so you don't have, fans turning on, when it is kind of needing more performance. But with Adobe, yeah, anything Creative Cloud, you could actually absolutely do. If you're near an Apple store, I'd highly recommend going and seeing the 14-inch MacBook Pro next to the 15-inch MacBook Air. Because like there's 14-inch MacBook Pro, there's 15-inch MacBook Air, there's 16-inch or 15, MacBook Pro. And I think overall the design and just the portability, and still for the even creatives now, like you can get a lot out of a MacBook Air. So I would definitely go for it. If you're thinking about longevity, I mean, apps are getting more and more power hungry because they're getting more and more power. So like we're doing a lot more things with web apps now, for instance, like this whole presentation has been in my browser the whole time. So I mean, if you have the budget for it and you want to upgrade, I would definitely say the RAM is always the smart one, because can't really upgrade anything on a Mac anymore, as we know, but RAM is one of those things that could help down the road if you're the type of person who is going to keep your Mac for a long time. The RAM's going to kick in longer the older the Mac gets, as programs just get more advanced, because we're just seeing, like I just showed you a couple of apps, just a lot of apps that are taking advantage of the new chip architecture. But if you can get away with it, and I think you can, I mean, the MacBook Air is my favorite right now, just because of the design and the portability and how great the performance is.
Cool. So next question, I might have to slightly rephrase this. Have you ever used these apps by Setapp for years, and have they ever tried to charge you an additional monthly rate? And the second half is, or have there ever been apps that get dropped from Setapp and then you get stuck paying multiple subscriptions for things?
That's a really good question. So the way that Setapp approaches everything is they work with app developers globally, and they actually approach app developers really trying to help them reach new audiences. It's very unlike like the Apple Mac App Store, where you kind of have to use it if you want to distribute. Setapp is trying to find the best of the best in every category. So that does come with some, changes, because even developers sometimes stop developing their apps. Like there are apps that any independent developer has their own business, just like freelancers do, and there comes a time when sometimes they decide that that's just not the path they're going to take anymore. So that's more often what I've seen. There's some rare instances, exactly maybe one, where there was an app in Setapp I was using for quite some time that I still use standalone, that left the app library, mainly because they were changing their monetization model. They wanted to charge more, and they're adding a lot of new features that not everybody needed. So that can happen in very rarely. But the nice thing is Setapp gives you a heads up about it. And in the overall pricing of how they do this it's really cool, because in the last couple of years, they've actually added way more, and they've included iOS apps. So they have a really interesting approach to giving you access simultaneously. It's normally like you would be paying for, some developers will charge for the Mac app if it's a premium app, and they'll charge for the iOS app as a separate app, because it costs a lot of money to make these apps and maintain them, especially when you're running your own business. What Setapp has tried to do is find those developers that do have both, and go ahead and make sure that you can access and get basically unlimited access on all platforms. So one good example would be in the freelancer set that I created. I use MindNode a lot to do mind mapping. And I really love it because it's very flexible for all kinds of different planning. But they also have a really robust, they've always had a great iPad app. And so you can actually click here and get the iOS app. You scan it with your device, you download it, and then the next step is you scan again and it unlocks a license inside the app. So Setapp's the only company that's created this really cool, very official way to allow developers to give you access without having to do in-app purchases. So for me, if there's an app that fulfills 95% of what I need and it's in Setapp, I'm most likely going to use that one, that I'm going to go and do whole new app subscriptions to new things until I know I actually need them standalone, just because there's pretty much something for everybody here. And I have not lost anything critical And Craft is brand new to Setapp. They're not a brand new app, but they've been with Setapp for the last year or so. And it's just the most effective way because you get the premium edition, so you can use a lot of the things that you would be upcharged for anyway. So yeah, it's a good question, but that's how I think about it, when I'm subscribing to these.
Cool. So we have another question. Do you have any recommendations on how to handle really large photo archives on iCloud or with iCloud?
Might need some more clarification on that because like for instance, I have a really large photo archive on iCloud. The way that I use iCloud is I actually use what's called the Apple One plan with my family. So I spend about $32 a month, which gives 5 people the family sharing access. So we all share the same iCloud Plus storage, which is 2 terabytes in that plan. And it includes all the other Apple services for fitness, news, the additional features on, for backing up and things. So that's the first thing I did. Now, my problem was as an individual, I have a way big app or photo library that's eating up a lot of that 2 terabyte space that we're all sharing. So there is a way that you can also use your own iCloud storage as part of, a family storage. So that was my situation. If you're using it all by yourself and you're maxing out at 2 terabytes, there is a new feature. This might not be the only answer, but there's a new feature in the Photos app, and it's easy to use on the Mac to look for duplicates. So you can have it scan your entire iCloud library now, and it does this intelligent job of merging those duplicates or finding the best of the 2, and then just automatically removing and putting the other ones in your trash. And you can review them. They stay there for like 90 days. So if you've been taking a lot of photos, like for me, sometimes I'll take lots of iPhone photos and I'll take 2 of everything. That's one way that I've gone ahead and kind of like cleaned up really quickly. And also there are some utilities in Setapp that help you with being able to clean up. There's Gemini is on the Mac. Gemini is really great specifically on iOS because it's kind of like CleanMyMac for your photos. And I like it on iOS because it has just a really intelligent interface. So that's another way where you can if you want to get really like deep in the weeds of removing as many photos as you don't need, that's an option. And then at that point, also just considering other backup solutions. If you're taking up most of your iCloud space. I do use a program called Backblaze that's probably a few of you have heard of. It's been around for quite some time. They have a helper that runs in the background on your computer at all times that does a cloud backup of everything that's local. So I have that running, but there is a feature in Backblaze called a snapshot. So you can pay a couple of cents per gigabyte and you can do a snapshot of an entire hard drive or if you wanted a folder. So if you did get to the point where you just have such a deep archive of photos that are like going back, because now we've had iPhones for a decade, so we're getting into the point where we're kind of hitting this critical mass. You might want to take older photos and back them up somewhere else. Like obviously I wouldn't dissuade saying put them on external hard drive, but I'd also say have something that's like a live snapshot of those files and put them somewhere else. So there's some redundancy, and that's all encrypted. It's not accessible publicly. It's all, it's all private. And then you just do a 1-click download of that archive when you need it. I think I back up an external hard drive that's 500, 600 gigabytes worth of storage that I don't need to access ever in Backblaze. And I think I pay like $1.50 a month for that snapshot. So it's very affordable. And it's just a good way to know that you do have redundancy. So I know there's no like, I don't know if there's easy answers to that, but those are a couple of things I would be thinking about if you're starting to get to your 2 terabyte max. And maybe Apple will expand that at some point.
Cool. All right. So we have a few more questions coming in. Conceptually, is Setapp the magazine subscription equivalent to Apple News?
Yeah, it's equivalent to Netflix, basically. It's like they played around with that. It was like the Netflix for apps. So yeah, it's essentially the same thing that Apple's doing now with a lot of their apps, where it's an all-in-one subscription. And I don't think Apple will ever do anything like what Setapp is doing because they have to be impartial. So they can't. And it's actually closer. To be fair, it's actually closer to Apple Arcade if you're familiar with that. So Apple One plan includes Apple Arcade. Apple Arcade is a specific tab in the App Store. And Apple has decided to work with game developers and in some cases encourage them to develop certain games for Apple Arcade that are exclusive. And then you get that as part of the growing library of Apple subscriptions. So it's closer to Netflix or Apple Arcade where it is curated. They manage it. There's also, reviews that are a lot more helpful, I would say, than what I read on the App Store. And you can do, the really cool thing is you can do an instant install, like really instant. So instead of like waiting for a long time, you can just click install. If you have fast internet, not only will it'll actually just do everything in the background. You don't even need to go through the process of moving the app into your applications folder or anything like that. And there's instant uninstall. So there will be, like, for instance, they just launched a AI app collection recently, and they're growing it. It's grown even the last 2 weeks, and you can try them out really quickly. So you just hit install. There's no commitment. You're already paying, so there's no commitment. And then if it's not for you, you can go ahead and just remove it, a few clicks later. So yeah, it's very similar to, having your Netflix subscription.
Cool. All right. A couple more questions are coming in. I'll go to this one first, and I'll go back to the one about the Mac Mini. Related to the new MacBook Air 15-inch question, under what use cases would it make sense to pay more than 8 gigabytes of unified memory?
Yeah, going back to that question, I think again, it's going to be creative apps that need to do background rendering, or you're doing a lot of rendering, so it's going to be video related for sure. Or if you're in animation, anything that's going to be tapping that processor and using the full extent of it. And the RAM is just going to allow those, your current applications not to slow down. So I'd probably say in those cases, Creative Cloud, even Adobe, to their credit, they've been optimizing their apps for Apple Silicon chips the last couple of years. They used to not be that optimized. They used to be very buggy in some cases, downloading updates. So I think even Adobe has kind of been doing a better job. So if you're using more of the traditional things like, Lightroom or something like that, you can definitely play it safe upgrading the RAM, but probably just looking at if you're going to spend extra money, make sure you have a big enough internal storage hard drive. Like if you're saving a lot of stuff, I would go for, lean more towards spending the money on a 1 terabyte hard drive or something if you need that space. And then if you still have it in the budget, go for the RAM as well. But yeah.
Cool. Next question is, I went with a Mac Mini for budget. I didn't want to be working off a laptop-sized screen, and because there are at least a few more ports, I got a cheap webcam and I'm using an old ViewSonic monitor. The weak spots are sound input and output. Any recommendations for inexpensive microphone speakers or solutions?
Ooh, that's a good one. I did the same thing 2 years ago. I bought the M1 Mac Mini. It actually was using my iPad Pro as the display, which there's ways to do that quite easily now. So that was my temporary situation when didn't fully need a desktop, didn't need to buy a really spec'd out MacBook Pro, and also was on the move a lot. So I've always been a big mobile user. In terms of, that is a really good question. I would say that it depends on how often you need the sound input and output. One of the features that, if we had time today, just brings us right to it, I was going to mention, is continuity on the Mac. There's a lot of continuity features that you may or may not know exist now. So continuity camera also includes continuity microphone. So when you're joining calls and you're going to, for instance, open up QuickTime or something that needs a microphone, more often than not, if your iPhone is on the same network and it's nearby, and especially if it's tethered and plugged in, you can actually use the microphone on the phone. So I've recorded voiceovers using my phone that's being relayed directly to my Mac using the continuity feature. You don't need extra software. It's all Apple's magic built in behind the scenes. That's one quick solution if you're not constantly needing a microphone on your Mac. And then in terms of speakers, we might have to connect offline on that. I personally haven't invested in nice speakers in a while, just because the speakers, I did end up getting a MacBook Pro, and the speakers are Dolby Atmos. They're very, very nice, so I don't need anything extra. But yeah, I could see with that setup, yeah, you do have to kind of add a couple of other extra items on. But there's, definitely the accessory ecosystem has gotten really strong around Apple, and a lot of more affordable companies have come in. So I don't know if Anker makes any speakers. I know they make like the AirPod competitors and all the charging stuff, but companies like Anker, I would look at, see if they have any options there. But yeah. And you can, again, if you're using an old monitor, that's great. You can also, connect, you can use an iPad, or you can use even another Mac if you needed to for the display. So there's a lot of cool things you can do in terms of using the Mac Mini.
Cool. And I think this will be the last question for the time being. If someone has several tabs or even into the quadruple digits, that's way too many at that point, and we'll be hosting lots of video meetings where lag time isn't desired, is there a case where paying for higher memory is warranted? How much more than 8 gigabytes if those are the only two main energy demands on the computer?
Yeah, I mean, it would be warranted. I think that goes back to if you notice that a lot of the work that you're doing exists in the browser now. I mean, we're seeing a lot of web apps become extremely popular. The browser is one of those big, performance hungry apps on our computer, where it's some cases our browser is kind of our operating system. So that would be a good reason to just kind of take a look at, and even run, if you're able to try out a new Mac, even at an Apple store or some other, retail location, maybe just do some real-time testing and open up a couple of those apps and tabs on a base MacBook Air, MacBook Pro, and see. I mean, I do have a 14-inch MacBook Pro, and just so you guys know what I'm running here, I do have the 16 gigabytes of RAM are default on a MacBook Pro. So yeah, I mean, I'm definitely taking advantage of it, but again, the 8 gigs, I think you'd be surprised what you can get away with. But yeah, I think just real world testing might be the best way to answer that question, if you can do that.
Cool. I think that's it for now.
Awesome. We have a little bit of time left, and we still have people on. I'd love to show you guys a couple more things, because if you're not excited yet, maybe you will be at this point. So the last two things is talking about just really modernizing. This actually ties into some of the questions around the performance of things and how I'm using different apps, and do I need a certain amount of RAM anymore. The number one thing that I want to talk about is search on the Mac. So really traditionally, and I know a lot of people don't even use this feature, but there is a Spotlight built into your Mac for searching. There's a free utility out there called Raycast that I've been using for a couple of years now. And this is really how I quickly navigate my Mac, because it takes the idea of a search bar on your computer and makes it more of an action bar for everything. So if you remember, I was talking about not having to go through and find the apps that you're looking for, find the files. So with Raycast, there's a lot of things you can do, and it's not actually that geeky as you might think. But with a standard key command, I can open up Raycast, or you can just open it up from here. And what it does a little bit differently is it has suggestions. So it will suggest things that you've most recently done on your computer. So this is really nice because there's some muscle memory there, but you can also start to fast search for things. So a good one is like passwords. I have favorited passwords that are in my settings on my Mac, and I actually set a shortcut to them. But I can just start typing and see even settings. So I can say, oh, where are the password settings on my Mac? Touch ID, I need to get to that. So rather than, again, opening up different things, you can just get to it really quickly. You can also do internet searches right from here. So if I wanted to, search I use DuckDuckGo as my search thing, I can just go ahead and put in this query, and, open it up right from here. I'm not even in my browser yet, but then it opens up that browser tab to my search and the Freelancers Union. And again, I just did that all from my keyboard. So this is how I navigate. And there's also, it's built in, but I have it set up for a different shortcut. I tap the command key twice, and I can actually search all my files with Raycast. It is way faster than Apple's default Spotlight, even though Spotlight's gotten a little bit quicker in the last couple of years. So why I use this is because it will show me my recent files. And most of the time, my recent files are probably what I'm going back to. And in this case, these are design files that I was working on recently. And so I can quickly go in, but I can also search, and this is instant search across the entire hard drive. I don't know how they do it this quickly. But if I was like looking up MacPaw, here's the MacPaw folder. And what's really nice is you can see where it's located. So if you're looking for something specifically, you can quickly preview it. And you can even take actions right from here. Like you can copy, you can open, you can share it. You don't even have to leave Raycast, but it's this one-click way. So this is how I navigate my computer. It could be a little bit more advanced for some people, but to me, it's like having this almost like command palette at my fingertips is really, really nice, especially when I'm in the middle of meetings. You guys have seen me use it a few times to open up different apps. And sometimes I forget sometimes what's even like that I've downloaded from Setapp. So, I will start, typing a certain type of app, and it'll show up right there just with, typing the first letter of each of those things, and even getting to the Finder. I'm lazy. Sometimes I just use this to get to the Finder. There is a premium version. I don't have it right now, but Raycast also has AI built in. So you can, Apple hasn't added really any native features for AI, but with Raycast, they'll walk you through a lot of these different features, and you can do AI prompts that will tell you things about stuff that's on your computer, which is kind of crazy. So I assume that Apple will add this down the road. They won't call it AI because Apple doesn't use like that terminology. But right now, Raycast is a really great way, and it is free. So it's a completely free utility. You don't have to pay for anything, and it's all local. It's not syncing anything up to their cloud or anything like that. So this is kind of the other piece. We talked about file storage. We talked about organization. This is navigation that allows me to move a lot faster and not have to overthink where I'm saving things all the time and how to get to them. So that's a little utility. The last one that I wanted to share with you guys today is a fairly new app on the market that is completely free as well. And it is called Arc. So this entire time I've been showing you guys this presentation in my browser. You might not realize this is a browser, but Arc is this entire reimagining of how we view and interact with the internet. And it's very Apple-esque. It is founded by a guy who actually worked early on back in the day at Facebook, and sold a startup to Facebook. Wasn't a Facebook person, but then went on, worked actually in the White House, advising on technology. And now he wanted to do this project to really help people take better advantage of how we interact with the internet and make it more enjoyable, kind of remove all the stuff that's gotten in our way. And so Arc is very, very different, but I'll show you why it's really helpful for me as a freelancer, because with Arc, primarily we usually are used to seeing this status bar at the top, all of our favorites, hundreds of tabs if we're someone who likes to use tabs, and sometimes that can just go on and on and on. Where Arc starts is they have introduced this idea that you can kind of have your dial pad almost of all of your favorites, and I can tab through them. So I'm working in Notion a lot of the time, so my Notion is always saved there. I have like where I'm communicating with people. I can go over to where I'm working on mind maps. I have my Slack saved, so I can tab through, and even with hotkeys, just go through my most frequently used favorites. And those live at the top of Arc all the time, regardless of where I am. And then what gets really interesting is Arc introduces this idea of, again, spaces. So I have my method space, and in methods, I can have folders, pretty normal, but I can actually hover over them and see everything that's in that folder and quickly get to these web pages. But as I go throughout my day, these are my tabs that are currently open. So I've been showing you guys this presentation the entire time in the browser. But if I instantly wanted to pin that tab, which is kind of like saving it, I can just move it up here into this list, and now it's saved. So I didn't have to do any multiple bookmarking things or whatever. And then if I was done with it, I could instantly remove it and actually just completely get rid of it. But the place where it starts to remove a lot of the kind of the overhead that we experience in the browser is it will auto archive tabs that you've had open for a certain amount of time, which Sounds scary in the beginning, but you will find that most of the things we keep open for more than a few weeks, we probably will never look at again. And that is usually one of the things that is really taking a toll on our overall just mindfulness in our work, but also just like the computer needs to keep all those tabs open. So you're pushing your operating system to do that. So like what I like to do is if I have something that I need to read or go back to, and I use these different spaces in Arc, I just move them up into my pinned tabs. And then when I'm done with them, I just literally click and close that pinned tab and goes away. I can restore it if I need to. And you'll see down here, I've actually been able to design each space where you can customize the color of the screen and the design. So this is where it also makes the browser a little bit more fun. But like I have all of the Slack organizations I'm a part of. Well, I have each of them pinned so I can go into them individually rather than having to go into Slack and then find the channel. I have each of these pinned. So it allows for me navigating throughout my day a lot, just a lot easier. And then in terms of going through Arc and using the internet, what's really cool is, let's say I am going to go ahead and open up the Freelancers Union website. And it's the first time I've come to this website, doing some research. And, I'm just thinking, okay, I just became a freelancer and I want to find out some of these resources. Rather than saving a ton of like little links or something, maybe I just want to remind myself of something on this page. So it has this capture tool built in where you can go up here and you can go ahead and start to, let's see here, they just moved it, but I'm just going to use the shortcut, but I can use the capture tool and I can capture anything on this website. So I can grab anything on the internet and I can just save this. And I can save this to the library in Arc, but I also can start an easel. And easels are really cool because rather than, again, bookmarking lots of different tabs, if I'm doing research throughout many different websites, I can just use the capture tool, add things to an easel, maybe write a quick note. I can also change the name of this easel if I needed to, if I was like, oh, looking for freelancer, resources all over, and, change that note. But then it's really cool is I can go right back to wherever that's essentially that screenshot, that capture I took, I can go right back to that original page from that screenshot, which is kind of cool. You can also get really creative where you can screenshot things that are live, like stock. You could screenshot a Spotify playlist, and there's this play button where you can make that screenshot live on the easel. So you could actually bookmark a whole easel and have your own little dashboard of things if you're someone who's doing a lot of stuff in your browser. I've seen people at Arc do really crazy things with easels, but it kind of brings this creativity to the browser that we've never had because we always see it as this one-dimensional thing. It's just there to go and view the internet, interact with it. But it kind of brings back some of these creative tools, similar like what we've talked about earlier, like in craft and stuff. So that's one thing. You can also quickly open up anything from their quick tab search bar, so you can start a new note if you want to start typing a note. Sometimes I do this if I don't have time to get out. If I'm doing something really quickly, I just need to capture something, not think about it. You can do that right in the browser, and you can drag and drop stuff. The other thing that I use really frequently is the ability to do split screens. So again, when we're on our Macs, sometimes we have to do these weird finagling of different windows, especially if we're looking at lots of browsers, or we're like running a meeting and we're trying to view something and we're also trying to like open up a second web page. Someone sent us a link in a chat, happens all the time. So I have a shortcut here, but you can also come up here. You'll see these little plus buttons. You can open up a split screen tab, and I could open up, a completely different website right side by side, and I can actually resize it. So if I want to look at different things at the same time, this for me comes really in handy when I'm working with clients, because sometimes I'll have like some kind of note up over here and I'll be looking at something that they're sharing with me, or we're doing a meeting right in the browser. So I do that a lot. What's really cool too is you'll see, if you remember, these are now over here as open tabs. They are combined tabs here. I can actually save that. So I can pin a split screen view for all of my use cases. So a real good example would be, I work in Notion a lot. So I might always want Notion open, and I might also want my email clients open simultaneously. And, I can go ahead and view an email while I'm working in Notion side by side, and I can interact with both of these tabs. And, if I decide, oh, you know what, I want to view this full screen, I can actually just separate this from that split screen, and now I can view it in the full screen mode. So Arc really becomes very malleable in how you're viewing and interacting with the internet and how you're remembering things. And you can always go back to those original tabs, and spaces are just a really nice way to work. If you're working in a field where you have projects and you need to collect a lot of different links, or, someone sent you, hey, we're going to be collaborating with this dashboard. You could, for a time, just have a whole space dedicated to one client or one partner or something, in Arc. And then when you're done with it, you could say, you know what, I'm done with that space. I can just delete that space. I don't need any of these bookmarks anymore. So everything can definitely be very fluid. But I've been using Arc for over a year and a half. They're a startup based here in Brooklyn. And they're just really doing some really cool stuff and trying to help people really take more advantage of like where the internet has gotten really overrun. And you can notice that like it's not, it kind of like craft, we're talking about that, the mindfulness element of it. I don't have all these other tab bars and stuff flying at me. I have a built-in ad blocker with Arc that comes with it. So I'm not constantly being inundated by new information. And it's just a really clean experience as I go about my day. So, and it also is built on Chrome. So you can use all of the Chrome extensions that you're used to if you're a Chrome user. But I've had people who are using Chrome and having really bad performance on their computers. And I'll say, hey, have you tried out Arc? And even in the middle of the call, they'll switch over to Arc, and it just the performance is so much better because they've hired engineers from Chrome, from Apple, from some of the biggest startups in the world that are working now on this browser. So they've got a really amazing team that I think is just kind of blowing everybody else out of the water. So if you do have reasons you have to use Chrome for work or anything, this is fully compatible based on Chrome's code base. So I would highly recommend giving it a try. And I'm sure there might be some questions. I used to use Safari for a really long time. I still use Safari on my phone. There is an Arc app on the phone, but I actually switched completely over to Arc because it was just so much more powerful, because I was doing so much of this multitasking work for my day-to-day that it got me off of using Safari as my default. So it's not, you can bring over all your bookmarks, all that stuff. It's not that hard to transition. But yeah, that kind of brings us to the end of everything I wanted to share today with you guys. And I'm sure there might be some more questions. But yeah, hopefully some of this has been really insightful. I am here every Wednesday physically in the Freelancers Hub. It's an amazing space. If you are anywhere in the New York City area, even across one of the rivers or in a nearby state, you should really make an effort to come by even during a trip and visit us, because it is just amazing resource to have free co-working space as a freelancer, where you can come in, meet other folks, get really focused work done, and have the support of the Freelancers Union. Jalen and the team here are really awesome. So that's why I'm here pretty much as I possibly can be, because it's been really helpful in my business. And I do offer every Wednesday what we call the Knowledge Bar. And it is one-on-one sessions with you, where you can sit down, ask those questions. We can go hands-on. If you have your computer with you, I'm more than happy to deal with even tech stuff that you might not want to ask. But then we can also get into more of the fundamentals and even kind of business development. I think a lot of times, if we're being more innovative with our technology, it really opens up the doors for us to grow our business. And the reality is today that we're all kind of running little tech companies of our own if you work for yourself. So you have to make sure your own tech is working well, but you also want to provide a really sophisticated experience to your clients, to your partners, to any companies you're freelancing with. Sometimes that can make or break you getting a job, depending on what kind of freelance work you do. So I really want to help folks out with that. So that's every Wednesday here at the Freelancers Hub in person. And then we'll also send a link along, and it was probably in the chat before, but I'm also offering kind of an AMA throughout the week. It's called Freelance Fundamentals. This is for all of my freelance friends here that are not in the New York area. I know we have a lot of folks across the country. So this is an opportunity for you to send follow-up questions, especially since you were in this workshop, as maybe some light bulbs go off in the next couple of days, and you're like, oh, what about this? What about that? I love curating apps for people. I love helping them find, potentially other platforms that'll help them run their business more smoothly, and even connect with other freelancers, because, I get to meet a lot of cool people here. So if you're not physically in New York, you can take advantage of the Freelance Fundamentals Q&A, where you can just send in your question via video or text, and I'll respond every Tuesday with responses that will be personal, and then it's an open conversation. So we're just trying to, make that resource a little bit more available, since we know everybody can't physically make it in here in person. And then I also just do consulting, through my business at Methods. So if you do want to do more in-depth kind of overhaul of your workflows, your processes in your business, we can, I can set aside these kind of more studio sessions that I do with folks that are really fun, especially once we get past all this stuff, which hopefully this workshop will give you a head start. So I think that covers everything. But thanks everybody for being so engaged and interactive today. This is really fun.
Cool. Thank you so much, Josiah, for taking time in your day to do this workshop for us. I will email everyone later today the recording link to recap everything. We know it's a lot of information that Josiah covered. So you can definitely recap that. It'll be available to you for 30 days. And I'll also include a couple other links as well that Josiah will send me. Definitely take a look at pretty much his AMA sessions happening on Tuesdays, and then his in-person sessions here at the Hub every Wednesday. Very happy to meet friendly faces. Come say hello to both of us. We'll most likely both be here. And that's pretty much it. And we hope you have a wonderful day.